Okay, now, lastly, we're going to cover sanitation here. So keep in mind that when you're working with wort, that it is a petri dish waiting to grow something. It's going to be at 70 degrees. It's going to be at the perfect temperature to grow whatever. We just want to do whatever we can to make sure that that everything that's going to touch the wort after it's cooled is going to be sanitized. Now that's different than sterilized. Sterilized means nothing alive at all. Sanitized means bacteria under manageable conditions. In other words, it's not so inundated with bacteria it's going to really get a hold. We're going to have yeast that's going to get a foothold in our wort to start growing before anything else does. So I'm just going to use the opportunity to make a note that that don't cheap out and try to use bleach or something that's not This is cheap. It's $8 for a bottle, for the small bottle anyway. It's easy to use. It does a really good job of coating everything. You don't dry it. You just get it wet, and it sanitizes the surfaces of everything you're working on. So I totally recommend get a bottle of Star San and just use it in small, medium, large batches, however you want to do that. So, oops, get the right side here. They got this little measuring tool on there, and I'm just going to put in just a little bit because we're actually 1 ounce to 5 gallons, and I got about a gallon in here, so I just need a little bit. I don't want to make it super strong. And I'm going to stir this up here with my brew spoon, mainly because I want this sanitized too. I don't know where my little hops bags went, so I'm using this one, which is kind of a big one. But I'm going to put my other 1/4 ounce of hops while the wort is cooling in a bag, just to kind of minimize the floaties. The stuff that's cooking in there tends to sink to the bottom when it cools, so I'm not too worried about getting it in the beer. But I don't know, I've had issues in the past with late hop additions making floaties, or dry hopping. I usually dry hop in one of these little bags too, and then just pull it out before I'm ready to do something with it. So I'm going to put this in there too. Just kind of work it in there really good. And then lastly, I've got my fermenting vessel. And what I'm going to wind up doing is taking some of this and pouring it in there, sloshing it around. But in the meantime, I'm just going to grab it and take it apart here. I've already washed it. This is, since it's a tea jar, it's kind of vents itself across the top. This is not airtight. Some of you might have been wondering about the gases building up in here and blowing this up, and it would if this was sealed, but it kind of is leaky, so it'll let the gases come out. And the thing about carbon dioxide is that it's heavier than air, so it's going to want to stay. It's going to want to pretty much fill from the lid down to the wort. So we won't be introducing any. We shouldn't be introducing any. As long as it's not windy where you're storing your fermenting vessel, you shouldn't be really introducing any nasties in the air to your beer. So, but you still want anything that has the potential of touching it to be in the sanitizer. So I'm just going to take this apart and pull the seals out. Oh, there we go. Kind of take it apart here and open this up and get it on there. I'll open up this vessel. You can actually take this apart. It just unscrews. Just like that, and we're going to make sure that just everything gets a good chance of being sanitized. Okay, so once I do that, I think I'll go ahead and put this back together. Oh, I can hear my little rocker starting just to squirt out or spit out a little bit there. So it's building pressure, and it's all locked up right now. So it's just starting to get going here. Probably in a minute or two we'll hear a little beep, and it'll be starting its 20-minute boil. So I put this back on. And these things lock open, so be careful that you have it in the closed position. I can't tell you how many times, and I don't know why I'm a sucker for it, that I've forgotten that the thing was open when I started putting stuff in the fermenter. And okay, so let's get this thing on here nice and snug. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pour a little of this in here. Just like that. And I'm just going to swirl it around really kind of like that. Now there's a saying and it's really hard to get used to. They say don't fear the foam. The Star San gets kind of foamy, but it's not a bad thing. Everything I've read about sanitizing, and especially this kind of sanitizer, this no rinse, no dry sanitizer, is that the bubbles actually get into the little cracks and crevices that otherwise you wouldn't be able to get into. So I'm just going to make sure that this thing touches the whole jar, and then until I am ready to put my wort and yeast in the jar, I'm just going to set this upside down in here and kind of let it drain off. So if I get some bubbles in there, it's fine. It's not going to hurt anything. It's not going to hurt you if it's in your drink, it's in your beer. This is what it's made for. So we're just going to let this sit here, and when we're done chilling the wort and ready to put it in the fermenter and pitch the yeast, then we'll flip it over and kind of give it a good shake, along with the lid and anything else that we're going to put in there, the hops bags, and then we'll go ahead and put it in the beer. But just remember, be extra careful when you start. As soon as you're done with the boil and you're opening it up again, you got some time in there that you're safe, because it is 215 degrees as it cools down. But when it gets down into the 180s, you really are susceptible to getting something in there that you don't want in there, especially. And I'll raise it again. I'll raise the point again. But when I start cooling it in the sink, there's a lot of stuff in the sink. I mean, I washed it all out with bleach, and after I said don't use bleach, but the sink you can wash with bleach. There's a lot of nasties in there. You just don't want bleach near your beer. But you don't want to have ice water from the sink sloshing into your beer while you're trying to cool the wort. So that's the kind of stuff that ruins batches of beer. So. Alright, so our 20-minute boil is done, and normally we have an open kettle when we're doing a batch of beer, which allows some things like sulfurs and other flavors that you don't want in your beer to escape. So since this is all under pressure, we just very carefully release the pressure. I don't usually open it up full blast because it's very close to the top of the pot, and it will likely spew out pretty good. So it takes a few minutes, but I just very carefully bleed off the gas. You're probably going to stand there for about 2 or 3 minutes bleeding that off before it's to a point where the lock releases, and we can go ahead and start actually moving the kettle over to the cold water bath to cool it off. Just be very careful to not burn yourself during this process. So, okay. Here is our ice water cool down. We want to be very careful to not get any nasty water into the wort. So, and then on top of that, we've got our sort of our hop stand edition. We're just gonna. This is a sanitized bag. I've got another. It's supposed to be a 1/4 ounce, but this is gonna be a 1/3 ounce. So this should give us a little more of just plain old floral notes. You can see some of my other boiled hops in there floating around. I'm just going to let those things soak in there. And I'll pull out the hops bag before we put it in the fermenter. So that's the general idea. The idea is the sooner you can cool down the wort, the more of the protein that'll break out of the boiled wort in the process of the cool down, and that'll help us get a nice clear finished beer when we're all done. Okay, so we got our cold water bath underway here, and it's okay to stir it. Just make sure that all of your utensils are thoroughly sanitized. At this point, everything that goes in there is really taboo. So we can stir it around here, and there's one thing I want to look at here. That is, when we stir it, we'll see kind of some separation of some stuff, and it's like this right here, and it's called a hot break, or a cold protein break, and it's basically where the protein in the wort has separated out, and it'll fall to the bottom. So we're just going to kind of keep moving that around. I'll probably replace the water a couple of times too to keep trying to cool it down. Once it gets down to about 70 degrees, I'll go ahead and pull out this hops bag right here, and then pitch the yeast, or put it in the fermenter and pitch the yeast. So that should be where we're at next here. This is finally cooled off. You can see it's dark outside, but we got this down to about 75 degrees. And now we're just going to pour this right into the fermenter, but there's kind of all this other kitchen sink water around it. So I usually make it a point to go ahead and dry that stuff off. If you want somebody to help you, that would probably not be a bad idea either. Grab the fermenter. It's still sitting over there in the sanitizer, just like we left it. But it looks like we got about 1.5 gallons, which is what we were aiming for. So let me get this out of here. I'll go ahead and double check to make sure my valve is closed, since I almost always forget it is closed. I'm going to set this. This is just all fermented freshly. Now, the yeast needs oxygen to breathe, and boiling it tends to take the air and the oxygen out of the liquid. So this is the one time during beer making where you kind of want to slosh it around and try to aerate it as much as you can. So I'm going to be a little aggressive pouring it. Any other time, like when we're bottling, we try not to move it at all. We try to keep it as calm as we possibly can. So I'm just going to start pouring this in and see if I can get it to slosh around inside the jar. Kind of the more the better. We really want it to aerate. Can you get a shot of the inside the pot there, hon? So you can see we got a little bit of trub in there. And I'm going to try to leave as much of that behind as I can. It's okay to get a little in there. Some of that the yeast will consume as protein. Okay, so there's our hops and the rest of our protein break that we had. Nice hot protein break from the pressure cooking. So, and that stuff we're just going to toss out. We're just going to throw that away. So I'll set that over here. Now, remember I had the yeast, which I saved from another batch of beer, which the yeast is actually down here. This is actually beer up here. It just has separated since I've kept it in the fridge. So I'm just going to decanter that off a little bit. And the rest of this, I'm just going to go ahead and agitate it, because this is going to be my yeast. This batch of beer, and this should be plenty to get that going. Just like that. Okay. And I'm going to take my sanitized lid and put it right in there. Now, normally what I would have done, and I probably should have, I was thinking about it, I just wasn't ready for it. Normally I get a gravity reading on this beer, so I'd know about where my ABV is. But I made this one before. It should be coming in around 5.5%. The last time I made it, that's pretty close to what it was. So we'll see what this looks like in a few days. In another week, I'll dry hop it. We'll put another 1/2 ounce of hops in it. And about a week after that, we'll start working on bottling it. So that's it for tonight.